Welcome to another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am your host, Hector Kolonas, and this is week 9 of 2026. Today I'm joined by a guest co-host, Kyle Chang. How are you? Welcome to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed.
Hector, I'm doing great, man. How are you? I heard you got some snow over there in the East Coast. Just a little bit, right?
I was actually away last week in the sun. As people may be watching on the video version, notice I'm a little bit darker than I was the last episode, and landed right into that blizzard. And I was like, well, that's great. But we were on the last flight that landed before they canceled everything for a day and a half. So got back, managed to get the newsletter out this week, which is great. So Kyle, for folks who don't know you, where do you sit in the co-working world?
Pleasure to be here. My name's Kyle, and I currently live in California in the beautiful city of San Francisco. I work at Yardi as a senior account executive, and my main role is to provide technology-based solutions to our strategic and enterprise accounts, specifically in the co-working and flex industry. And apologize for my dog over here. He's our chief marketing officer over here at Yardi. His name's Casper. Might just be the pretty face in the background throughout this call. But yeah, that's what I do over here at Yardi.
That's awesome. And for folks who are listening in on maybe Spotify or Apple Podcasts, switch over to the video format. Have a look, Casper, gorgeous guy. Alrighty. So you mentioned that you're with Yardi in the co-working world. Obviously, Yardi's product is Yardi Kube. That is kind of what people know you for, probably in the co-working world, as well as Voyager and your accounting backbone. But this week, you're making the case that it is better to have all your systems in one place, one platform that manages everything. Is that what you want people to know about Yardi Kube? If I had to ask you, why is it better than anything else in the market right now?
I think that before I even explain what the value in an all-in-one solution is, it's important to understand how Yardi got to this point of developing in that direction. So I suppose just some quick context is we've been around for 40 years. And through those 40 years, there have been two main guiding principles that we've always followed. And the first is that we don't really want external investors, right? We've remained a privately held company. And the second guiding principle, which is a direct result of the first, is that we can be an incredibly client-driven organization because we have no pressure from those outside or external investors. And this has allowed us to position ourselves not just as a software vendor, but a long-term technology partner, right? Because we simply make solutions based on the needs that our clients give us. A great example of this is we do work and partner with Tishman Speyer, the studio brand, and I think they see a lot of value in us, not just to be able to provide them with simple software, but this ability to really think long-term, tell us hey, years down the line, this is where we see ourselves, right? Can you provide the resources and do you have the bandwidth to be able to go in that direction with us? And so to circle back to answering your question around what is the value around an all-in-one solution, I would first start by saying that we built it in this way because this is what has been requested from us, right? I think our clients naturally came through this journey where they saw themselves growing, and when they were small, what worked then not necessarily what worked when they got to a larger size or scale. And more specifically, they piece on a solution here, they piece on a solution there, they piece on a solution everywhere. And then they get to this point where with every new location that they may add on, there's exponential risk associated with having so many disconnected solutions, whether it's from a data perspective, an operational perspective. And quite frankly, it takes a lot of time to manage these things. And at the end of the day, I've always believed that software should do three things. The first is that it should streamline processes, or more simply put, save you time. The second thing is mitigate risk, whether it's financial, legal, or risk associated with just human error. The last is that it should create a vehicle to drive, no pun intended, growth, whether it's in revenue or in scale, right? So I think there's an alignment within the industry that our software is able to facilitate those kinds of processes. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of the value in the all-in-one solution is. It just organically came to this point, and that's kind of the thing that we try to provide for a lot of our clients.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, because I speak to a lot of operators around their tech stacks almost every day, all day. There was this connotation or implication that because it's an all-in-one solution, it's hard for it to integrate with external system. Are you saying that that's not true? It's just a matter of having one center of truth as opposed to Yardi does everything? Because you mentioned in the newsletter this week that you can ditch the QuickBook exports because it's an all-in-one solution. Like, what does it mean exactly? Does it mean that you're going to do everything? You're going to do what QuickBooks does, you're going to do what Stripe does, you're going to do what door access systems do, or does it mean that you can orchestrate these things from inside Yardi Kube?
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing this up. We actually get this all the time, right? And I think this is more an issue around, we'll call it perception, than it is around technical limitations. Just because you go to a buffet doesn't mean you're going to eat everything that's presented in front of you, right? But we also acknowledge that there are going to be operators that want to integrate with external solutions. And quite frankly, we have integration capabilities. We just don't necessarily advertise them straight out of the gate, because the value that we want to provide to a lot of the operators is to just consolidate and streamline their processes as much as possible, right? So we also have open APIs that work with our solutions. We integrate directly with marketing solutions like HubSpot. We can use Zapier just like a lot of the other players within the industry. And I suppose that's why it's important that there are salespeople like me to educate a lot of the operators, because we do market our solution as something that is all-encompassing and all-in-one. But there's different ways that we can configure the solution, and it is modular in a sense that it can definitely pull things out for you.
And so because it's so modular, does that affect, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, the pricing benefit, right? Are they paying kind of a flat fee and they get everything, or depending on which pieces of the Cube puzzle, it changes like the pricing? What does the financials look like for someone who's interested in using Cube?
So generally speaking, it is all encompassing within a licensing model. I don't think that our goal here is to nickel and dime our operators. I don't think that would be the best experience for them to have. Ultimately, if you sign on with us, you're going to essentially pay an implementation fee and a licensing fee. We're one of few, I suppose, software companies out there that don't charge like a commission rate for things like e-commerce on your website. We try to keep it as simple as possible, and we've just found that that's to better relationships with our clients, and quite frankly, it makes them happy, right? Because they know that you just have to pay the licensing costs associated with, we'll say Yardi Kube, although we do a number of other different services, and you get everything, and you can kind of just choose which ones you want to use. And ultimately, the salespeople within Yardi are also great, and we'll try to find something that works for everyone.
That's amazing. All right, so we said that obviously you try to make it as all-encompassing and as seamless as possible. The world of the co-working stack just keeps growing, right? We've seen Yardi as a company recently acquire, Hubble and DeskPass and bring them into the co-working cafe ecosystem, which means you're now also doing that piece of it. What can you say to folks who may be slightly worried that you're trying to do 100 things okay-ish instead of doing the 5 things really, really well?
Yeah, I think I would say that we are trying to, through the breadth of all of our products, we're actually trying to do all of those things as best as we can. Like, our goal and vision is not to just have our fingers in every pie. We want to be best in class, right? Like, we want to provide the best solution in every department and in every category, whether it's marketing, operations, finance, billing solutions, right? Like, our goal is not to just be okay. We do want to be great. We want to give our clients the best possible solution that we can. I'm actually working with a client right now, Bond Collective, who's based out of New York. And one of the big initiatives that we're actually doing for them is trying to consolidate as many of their solutions, because they're doing this great thing right now where they're kind of like preparing themselves for the future. And they just like to know that everything kind of works and syncs together. And every piece of that puzzle needs to work incredibly well, right? If it doesn't work as best as it can, they're probably going to move to another solution, right? That's the simple nature of the game. So yes, to address what you initially stated, I think we are trying to do everything incredibly well, not just like halfway there.
I love having these conversations because it's the same conversations I keep having with operators where we help them figure out what is the best tech stack for the type of business that you run. That is what I spend 90% of my day doing. So I'm glad to hear that that's also how you're approaching it. It's not that you have to use all of our features, but which features best suit your business.
Yeah, and if I could just kind of add, like, I think there's a huge value in kind of having everything in one place. We talk about this all the time, right? But like risk associated with fragmented systems and data inaccuracies is huge with a lot of our clients. And I think part of that value proposition to have so many different solutions and so many different, we'll call it like facets of your business. One of the biggest risk mitigations that we provide for our clients is they can just trust that everything is the way that it's supposed to be from an accuracy perspective, right? So not having to worry about something like that is huge for them. And I think that's another huge reason why we've chose to design the system and kind of like build into every little, we'll call it department that we're in right now.
I could geek out about like the whole monolith versus modular approach all day, every day with you, Kyle. But let's dive into some of the news this week. Sticking close to what we're just talking about, one of the problems that most operators have is there is so much to do, and what the traditional approach is just to throw people at it, right? You have too many decisions to make, you hire a COO. You have too many marketing decisions to make, you hire a CMO. You have too many kind of sales and you have to hire a CSO or CRO. And then you've just got these really high paid folks who are tackling things, and you maybe are not at the scale to actually tackle those challenges all day, every day. So we shared a link from Andrew Runnette this week where he was talking about maybe most spaces don't actually need a full-time COO, even though they're hitting that point where it's becoming a bottleneck, and makes the case for fractional executives. And this is actually a topic that's been a bit of an emerging undercurrent over the last couple of months. We're seeing more and more firms get comfortable with this idea that we don't need full-time execs. We have a CEO, we have a CRO. We don't need a full-time COO. We don't need a full-time CMO. And it's just a really interesting take. But I also know that Andrew dives into some of just like great insights that he's had running and growing portal warehousing from 1 location to 7 locations. What did you take away from this piece by Andrew?
Yeah, and I honestly like there's no shortage of good things that I can say about Andrew. I work very closely with him, and I suppose like simply define what he's really good at. He is very good at creating like a lean, mean, well-running machine. And I did read that piece from This Week in Coworking just this morning. What he's trying to essentially say is if you have bottlenecks within your organization, there is this perception and idea that throwing an incredibly high paid employee at that bottleneck might solve the issue, when actually it's operating architecture that's usually going to be the solution, right? And at the end of the day, if you don't have a great foundational system or methodology in the way that you're running your business, it doesn't matter how many $250,000 employees you throw at it, you gotta fix the issue kind of like at its core, right? Completely agreed with Andrew's sentiment there.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew and I have many conversations about this. And we always discuss how for a very long time, tech and ops have been two completely separate. Like there's an ops issue, we throw people at it. Tech, we go and put out RFPs, we find new tech. But in reality, there's no tech stack and ops, there's just ops stack. It's people and technology working together in a systemized approach to grow the business. And that's, I think, what I took away from this piece is just really hitting that message home again, that you need to think about both your technology and your people as a process, as workflows, as a systemized, as you said, architecture to really fix the bottlenecks and not just be like, well, we're gonna just bring someone in who's gonna come and fix this, or bring with someone in who's high paid from another industry who has to learn the business before they can actually start executing and improving. And I think that's kind of feeding into this undercurrent of fractional executives in our industry, because there are some very talented, experienced people who should be demanding $500,000 salaries, but the industry hasn't caught up that there's enough firms to be able to pay them. So now they're spreading their time and their knowledge and their expertise across multiple companies and kind of lifting up the tide for many boats. So just really interesting that we're starting to see people building better systems and better processes, but also this adaptation and attraction of fractional executives into the industry to really speed up those improvements and break those bottlenecks?
Margins can be kind of small within the co-working industry at the level that it's at right now, right? So you need to be incredibly intentional and diligent about like the decisions that you make that are essentially going to be the core of your business, right? Like we don't necessarily live in a world where you can kind of just throw money at these problems all the time and hope that they go away. The solutions have to be incredibly intentional. So agreed there.
And on the topic of money, in the data section of the newsletter this week, we have some numbers out of Australia from Whatso sharing their annual 6-month revenue, all up to the right, 7% increases there. Prices going up across Spain. So definitely, if you are listening in, head over to thisweekincoworking.com and click on week 9. You'll be able to get all those data bits and actually see that the market is growing, it's just not growing fast enough for everyone to afford a $500,000 COO. So moving on to the next story and bringing a little bit back to kind of the co-working elements. We also shared a piece from Sophia Stolberg over at Piloto 151, who reflected on some observations she made during some Valentine's Day celebrations at a space. I know this caught your eye, Kyle. What did you take away from this piece?
Well, we all love Sophia within the industry as well, and I think we can all agree that something that she's great at is creating a vibe and a community around or amongst everyone that she surrounds herself with. I would say that the main thought that I had when I was reading this piece is that she really hits it like nail on the head, that creating a sense of community and the engagement that you have with your members is the heart of co-working, right? Like we're not just selling office spaces and we're not just giving people a place to work. Mike Creel over at Launch, I think he had a statement that was very similar, or a sentiment that was similar to this, where you need to be very conscious about how your staff kind of works in tandem with the members and tenants that are in your space. And you can't necessarily be like robotic, right? Like it can't just feel, I'm going to use the word corporate. Sophia does an incredible job with things like this, where it comes to connecting with the members within her space. And another thing that I suppose really caught my eye reading this is she talks about the level of intention and work it takes to create these authentic experiences. It is a lot of work, right? Co-working is this weird intersection between real estate, but also hospitality. And creating those connections is fundamental, foundational, and quite frankly necessary to having a successful co-working space nowadays.
Yeah, I completely agree. You have to be intentional about creating those moments of delight, creating those moments of serendipity, making moments of actual connection. So often we'll see posts online of operators where they're like, we put out 10 bagels and no one came, and we did the bare minimum. And you have to really go to where your members are and think about how do you create those moments. And I think that's why I also took away from this is, yes, it takes time, but the rewards are there to be reaped if you take the time to sow the seeds, right? So it's just a really, really great observation. Just to take it to another link that we shared this week, there was a piece shared by Carlos Almanza at Nexodus, where he looked at the fact that hot desking needs more respect. In many of the publications over the last couple of months, we've seen folks kind of take a bit of a negative view on the fact that hot desking isn't the moneymaker it used to be. This, going back to Bond Collective, their newest locations don't have hot desking capabilities or space because no one wanted fixed desks. They don't want dedicated desks actually. So it's just really interesting to see these diverging opinions that yes, they're important because they're great for building community. They're bringing people in who are kind of in and out, sharing space, bumping into each other. They're driving some form of revenue because they're a little bit lower commitment than maybe a dedicated or an office, but they also allow you to have this flow. On the flip side, they're not as popular anymore because people want day offices, they want team suites, they want fractional offices. The product suite is changing, but what are you seeing from the spaces that you're talking to? Are you seeing that dedicated desks or even hot desking is still a thing?
I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, that so many different operators are so unique in their business structure. And honestly, I think that's one of the greatest things about co-working is that you can do it in an infinite number of different ways. What we find at Yardi is that for many operators, not all, because I can name a few operators out there that kill it at we'll call it like true co-working model, yes, like revenue is still driven heavily by private office leasing and spaces. But I think to suppose hit specifically on the article that Nexus put out, hot desking is incredibly important, right? We just talked about how within the co-working space, the sense of community is incredibly important. Whether or not hot desking can make you the most money, it still is going to be one of those main launch pads to meet someone in a different industry or a complete stranger that you never would have met if you were in a glass cube, right? As we can call it. And so the hot desking does deserve a little bit more credit. I don't think it's ever going to go away within our industry. And even if it was in a weird way like a loss leader for some operators, I don't think they'd get rid of it because it's so important for them to create this sense of community within all of their spaces.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that's actually why, I think it was Tishman Speyer, they won the HSBC deals because they had the hot desking for spillover, even if it was never used, that they won the other contract because they had the hot desking capabilities. And it's just, yeah, so it's just really interesting. I think maybe the way hot desking is used and accessed and how technology evolves around allocating those desks, making it more seamless, will change and will change how the product works, just like fractional offices and day offices is changing meeting rooms. I think we're going to see more of that over the next couple of months and years, but I totally agree with you that it's not going away. I think it will still be a big part of many co-working businesses. And I'm not sure about out in San Francisco, but in New York, every couple of weeks, we have a new startup that's creating hot desk-like offerings in coffee shops and bars and restaurants. And I'm like, well, there is enough demand from whole new markets for that communal shared space that should be a signal in all the noise for people running co-working spaces that hot desks are still in demand. Maybe you just have to go and meet that market where they are.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And so we had some other tech news. We saw an acquisition of SpaceFlow being absorbed into Haida. We saw a new layer being built by some community operators to share insight into the community side of co-working as opposed to like just revenue, invoicing, access control, all of that stuff, called GathrOS. It's still very new, so we're going to keep tracking that on the newsletter. We'll make sure we dig into that a bit more. And a few great conversations shared in the newsletter. So definitely, if you're done listening to this, because we're about to sign out and say goodbye to Kyle for today, go in and listen to those podcast episodes as well. If you are listening in to this anywhere in the US, we're gonna be at GCUC in New York in April. So come and see us there. Kyle, are you gonna be joining us in New York?
Yeah, we'll have that beer or coffee that you talked about earlier.
Sounds great. We'll do that. And on the Friday following GCUC, we're doing a TWIC co-working leaders meetup. So if you are in New York for the beginning of the week for GCUC, and you can stay around, we'd love to host you for coffee on the Friday morning at 10 a.m. And outside of that, we will be back in your podcast feed with some exclusive interviews with some really interesting stories going behind the news. So definitely wherever you're watching or listening to this, hit subscribe, and we'll make sure you hear more from Kyle in the future as well. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. It is always a pleasure geeking out with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hector. I appreciate your time.